For 3 days straight, that girl was crying on my bus. Walter Harmon, a 62-year-old black man, glanced at the rearview mirror and saw Rory Carson, a ninth-grade transfer student, shakily wiping tears from her eyes in the front row. Every afternoon, the scene repeated like a cut in his heart, but this afternoon was different. A clink sounded from under Rory's seat, like metal striking something. When Walter checked the bus's surveillance footage to see more clearly, the data from that day was completely gone. Who deleted it? And why? From that moment, Walter knew he had stepped into a mystery where a single misstep could cost a young girl's life. Was Rory just grieving, or was she trapped in a nightmare that the entire town refused to face? The yellow school bus rolled slowly through the suburban streets of South Chicago, its paint faded under the autumn Sunday. Behind the wheel, Walter Harmon gripped the steering with calloused hands, fingers still curved as if recalling the grease of his mechanic days. At 62, with short salt and pepper hair, he had retired from the garage after 35 years. But soon, the silence of his empty apartment made him feel twice his age. The school bus driver job, for an African-American man, accustomed to discipline, became a lifeline. Structured hours, responsibility, and most importantly, the young faces that reminded him life was still in motion. This afternoon was no different from others, at least for most students. Laughter, the scrape of backpacks on the floor, and chatter about the weekend football game blended into a chaotic orchestra. But for Walter, those sounds were mere background. His eyes, through the rearview mirror, fixed on the same scene for 3 days straight. Rory Carson, the 14-year-old black girl, sat alone near the front, her back hunched, her small shoulders trembling. Her curly hair hung loose, covering half her face. Every few minutes, her hand clumsily rose, wiping away tears. No sobs, no sniffles, just a heavy silence, as if Rory were trying to melt into the seat to avoid notice. But Walter noticed. He always did. 30 years fixing engines taught him that small glitches often signaled a larger problem waiting to erupt. Walter had tried talking yesterday, casual questions like, "How's the new school going, kid?" But Rory only nodded, her red eyes avoiding his gaze in the mirror. Her silence stirred a clear feeling in Walter. This wasn't just teenage sadness. Something heavier was weighing her down. The bus slowed, and 2 boys hurried off at 5th Street, leaving 8 students. The atmosphere quieted. Then, Walter heard an unusual sound. Clink. A metallic noise came from Rory's seat. He glanced quickly in the mirror and saw her bend low, her hand disappearing under the seat. His heart skipped a beat. "Everything okay, kid?" His voice rang out, trying to stay calm. Rory's head snapped up, her eyes startled. "Yes. Just dropped a tissue," she stammered, her voice faint as a breeze. Walter nodded, pretending to accept it, but suspicion surged within him. He didn't recall ever seeing Rory with a tissue. The bus turned onto Maple Drive, where sloped-roof houses stood in rows. The students dwindled. Only Rory remained, the last stop. As the bus stopped, she slowly stood, pulling her pink backpack onto her shoulder. Her puffy eyes betrayed exhaustion. Walter forced a smile. "Have a good evening, Rory." She nodded, avoiding his gaze, and stepped off. As she reached the sidewalk, the green door of a house down the street swung open. Greg Whitmore, Rory's stepfather, appeared. The black man, around 40, muscular, with an unreadable face, called out, "Rory, get inside," his voice sharp. Rory glanced back, her eyes flashing fear, then hurried in. Greg shot a cold look at Walter. "Something wrong?" Walter stood from his seat, stepping down. "No, I've noticed Rory's been upset lately. Wanted to make sure she's okay." Greg shrugged, his face unmoved. "Her mom's away taking care of her grandma. She's just missing her. Don't worry too much, driver." The words sounded reasonable but hollow. No trace of sadness, no empathy. As Greg closed the door, his final glance at Walter was a silent warning. Walter returned to the driver's seat, unease flooding him. He told himself he might be overthinking. But Rory's tears, the metallic clink, and her fearful eyes were etched in his mind. Something was hidden under that seat, and Walter knew he had to find out what. Dear audience, take a moment to subscribe to the channel before diving into the main story, but only if you truly connect with what I'm sharing here. Leave a comment below letting me know where you're watching from and what time it is. It's fascinating to see people from all over joining us. The afternoon sky turned purple as Walter sat in the empty bus, the weak hum of the air conditioner filling the silent space. He usually spent 10 or 15 minutes after each route cleaning up trash or picking up forgotten homework. But today, it wasn't duty that kept him at the lot. It was a gnawing unease. Walter turned on the small screen above the dashboard, the security camera system the district installed last year. It recorded all activity on the bus, a useful tool for handling complaints and ensuring safety. He selected the right day, the right route. The screen flickered, showing a list of files. All were intact except today's. He blinked, thinking he'd misread. He tried again. Same result. The data from October 17 was gone. No way, Walter muttered, his fingers trembling slightly. Other days were fully saved. Only the day Rory bent under the vent was blank. This wasn't a random glitch. It was deliberate deletion. His heart raced, not with anger, but with a vague fear. If someone wanted to hide what happened today, Rory's situation was far from trivial. Walter leaned back, closing his eyes, steadying his breath. He remembered Rory's eyes when Greg called her inside like someone drowning, desperately seeking a lifeline. He'd seen that look years ago, in a neighbor's child abused by their father. Back then, Walter did nothing. That boy vanished from the neighborhood, never returning. He opened his eyes, scanning the bus. Rory's seat still bore traces of purple ink stain on the vinyl, a faint shampoo scent lingering. Walter knelt, his knees creaking. He ran his hand around the vent. Cold, tightly fitted metal. But there was a small gap between the frame and floor. He slid his fingers in, trying to pry it open. Click. The grate shifted, revealing a dark sliver. Walter reached in, touching something smooth. He pulled out a plastic packet. Under the bus's light, it was clear, a pink blister pack of pills, a few missing. The label on the back stunned him. Not vitamins, not cold medicine, birth control pills. A 14-year-old girl, 2 weeks into a new school, hiding birth control under a bus seat. Walter took a long breath, his body chilling. This wasn't as simple as Greg's, she's just missing her grandma. He grabbed his phone, snapping photos from multiple angles, noting the exact location. His heart pounded as he texted Principal Daniels. Found a pack of birth control pills hidden under a student's seat, Rory Carson. Photos attached. Please advise next steps. He hit send, waiting. 5 minutes. 10. No reply. Walter grew restless, deciding to call. After 3 rings, a gruff voice answered. Daniel's here. I'm in a meeting. What is it, Mr. Harmon? Walter kept his voice calm but urgent. I just sent you photos. It's serious. I think it's about a student's safety. And Mr. Harmon, Daniels cut in, his tone impatient. We can't stop a board meeting for small issues. I'll check your message later. But, I told you, only call for real emergencies. Beep. The call ended. Walter stared at his phone, frustration surging. What was more urgent than a girl crying daily, hiding birth control, and deleted camera footage? He pocketed the phone, anger flooding him. But amid the fury, a new resolve sparked. If the system wouldn't listen, he'd act alone. Walter stepped off the bus, a half-full trash bag left behind, the silent seats in its wake. Outside, dusk cast long shadows over the lot, streetlights casting a dim yellow glow on his face. He knew. From this moment, he was no longer just a driver. Not just someone ferrying kids to and from school. He was Rory's sole witness, the only one still paying attention. All right, my dear audience, if you're watching and finding this story compelling, comment 1 or I'm still here to keep listening. The old green Buick left the lot, its engine rumbling like an uneven heartbeat. Walter gripped the wheel, his eyes fixed on the dim road ahead, but his mind circled one face, Rory, her red eyes, her trembling shoulders. Years of experience told him a child didn't break down like that over homework. That pain had deeper, darker roots. The metallic clink, the birth control pills, the deleted footage all pieced together like a thin veil hiding a truth someone wanted buried. The sky blazed with the day's last red streaks as he drove past the houses along Maple Drive. Bare trees and a faint wind whistled between weathered eaves. The greenhouse where Rory lived appeared, silent under the dusk. Its windows were dark, no sign of life. Walter parked at the curb, his hands still on the gear shift. His chest felt heavy. Should he knock again? But Greg's cold stare and curt response stopped him. Tonight, the house's silence offered no comfort. He started the engine, about to leave, when a small figure on the distant sidewalk made his heart clench. Rory. She walked slowly, her posture heavy, as if fighting the cold wind. No backpack, just a thin beige coat, her arms clutching her stomach as if in pain. Walter quickly pulled over, stopping at the curb, but didn't get out. He knew a grown man approaching a panicked girl could worsen things. From a safe distance, he watched. Rory crossed the street, pausing at the pharmacy on Cedar Street. The neon green light cast a pale glow on her face. The glass door closed behind her, leaving Walter in the car, his heart squeezed tight. He sat, each minute stretching like hours. When Rory emerged, her steps wobbled, her body doubling over as she rushed to a trash can by the curb. The sound of retching echoed harshly in the quiet. Walter gripped the wheel. He wanted to run to her, to steady her frail shoulders, but fear of shutting her down held him back. Just then, a middle-aged couple passed by, pausing at the scene. They glanced at Walter, their eyes suspicious, then hurried to Rory, shielding her. From afar, Walter saw her look up, her lips moving. He couldn't hear, but her terrified eyes told him she'd said something that made them see him as a stranger to distrust. His heart sank. He started the car, quietly retreating into the shadows, leaving them with Rory. As he turned onto another street, the rearview mirror showed Rory still hunched over the trash can, the couple whispering. Helplessness surged within him. He tried to reach out, only to be pushed away as the villain. Yet his gut screamed that Rory was trapped in a nightmare far bigger than he'd imagined. Walter kept driving, intending to head home, but a spark flared in his mind. If Greg was behind this, he couldn't be at home and the pharmacy at once. The liquor store at the end of Cedar Street. Walter had seen Greg leave it weeks ago when stopping the bus nearby. A fleeting memory now became a vital clue. He turned the car, quietly returning to the main street. Within minutes, the Buick stopped near the liquor store. The neon sign flickered faintly on the glass door, yellow light spilling out. And there, before Walter's eyes, Greg stepped out, keys in hand. Behind him, Rory appeared, her small frame dwarfed, following unwillingly. Walter inhaled sharply, his heart racing. The scene cut through his remaining doubts like a knife. This wasn't a girl heading home with her stepfather for dinner. She was being pulled out of sight, right after a tumultuous afternoon. Greg locked the store, flipping the sign from open to closed, then placed a hand on Rory's shoulder, urging her to move faster toward a sedan parked nearby. Rory didn't look up, trudging forward, her hands clutching her coat's hem. Walter sat frozen behind the wheel, blood rushing to his head. This was no longer vague suspicion. It was a clear warning. Rory was being controlled, hidden, taken somewhere no one else knew. He gripped the wheel, his knuckles white. As Greg started the sedan, Walter eased on the gas, keeping a safe distance. The red taillights led through the dark. His heart pounded in rhythm with the metallic clink still echoing in his memory. This time, he knew, he couldn't let it go. The sparse streetlights swept dim yellow glows across the wet asphalt. Greg's silver sedan moved steadily west, its tires humming as they devoured miles of suburban road. Walter kept the green Buick at a safe distance, headlights dimmed, using only faint light to avoid notice. Each turn, each slowdown, made his heart pause, fearing Greg would spot him in the rearview mirror. But the man seemed oblivious, too focused on the passenger beside him. Rory sat curled in the front seat, her head bowed, her small figure swallowed by the car's frame. The road led out of town, where the last neon signs of a corner store faded behind. The landscape opened bare fields, and night wind hissing through the cracked window. Walter leaned forward, gripping the wheel. Alone, in an old car, tailing a younger, stronger man leading a girl into the dark. The thought sent sweat trickling down his neck, but resolve wouldn't let him turn back. After over half an hour, a light loomed ahead, a weathered wooden sign reading Lakeside Park. Greg turned into the park's entrance. Walter waited a beat, then followed, keeping far enough back. Tall, dark trees cast shadows over the path. In the silence, he heard his own heartbeat and the old engine's weary sigh. The lot held a few scattered cars. A family was packing up a picnic, kids laughing by a lone balloon. At the lot's edge, Greg parked the sedan, cutting the engine. Walter found a dark spot, hiding behind sparse trees, watching. Greg stepped out, feigning ease, holding a red cooler. Rory followed, her steps reluctant, her eyes fixed on the ground. They moved to a grassy area near the lake, where pale moonlight glimmered on the water. Greg spread a picnic blanket, unpacking the cooler, soda cans, a beer bottle, a sandwich box. From a distance, it could fool anyone a casual evening for a stepfather and daughter. But Walter saw the details shattering that facade. Rory's stiff body, her hands clutching her coat, her slow movements. He sat on a bench, a few meters away, posing as a lone visitor gazing at the lake. In the dim light, Greg handed Rory a soda. She took it but didn't drink. When Greg reached to touch her shoulder, Rory flinched, sharply pushing his hand away. The moment was brief, but Greg's face flashed a spark of anger. He pursed his lips, forced a smile, and opened his beer. Walter swallowed the tension in his throat. Part of him wanted to stand, march over, and pull Rory away. But reason held him back. An old man confronting a stronger one in an empty park was reckless. He needed evidence, witnesses, authorities. That's why he'd contacted the principal, only to be ignored. Without something solid, the police would see him as a paranoid old man. As he wrestled with his thoughts, 3 figures approached from a trail. 3 black men, casually dressed, jeans jackets, baseball caps, but their steps were deliberate. Greg stood, waving as if greeting old friends. They shook hands, patted backs, exchanging fake smiles. Rory sat still, her hands gripping the unopened soda, her eyes warily watching the strangers closing in. Walter felt the atmosphere shift. This wasn't a picnic, not a family evening. This was a meeting, something entirely different, hidden beneath an innocent surface. After a brief exchange, Greg motioned for Rory to stand. She hesitated but was pulled up, pushed along with the group. The 5 crossed the grass, heading toward a small white brick building, a maintenance shed isolated at the park's edge. One of the men pulled out a key, unlocking the door. Rory was led inside, her frail figure vanishing into the dark frame. Walter sat stunned. Every instinct screamed that this scene had no lawful explanation. A teenage girl being led by 5 grown men into a locked shed in an empty park. He grabbed his phone, hands shaking. The screen glowed in the dark. He dialed 911. The operator's calm voice was familiar, a lifeline to Walter now. He reported the location, what he'd seen, describing each person, each car. The operator assured him a patrol was minutes away. Walter swallowed hard. 10 minutes could be a lifetime. He crept toward the shed's dusty windows, wiping one with his sleeve to peer inside. Under a dim yellow light, 5 men stood around Rory. She pressed against the wall, her eyes wide with tears. Greg stood close, his voice hissing like a blade. Walter caught fragments, enough to chill his heart. Rory trembled, her lips pleading, but Greg's coarse laugh drowned her out. In the distance, No police sirens yet. Dear audience, are you still here? Take a moment to relax, maybe grab a glass of water, and keep listening to this gripping story. Comment 1 if you find it intriguing, and don't forget to subscribe. Walter pressed his back against the shed's wall, his heart pounding. Rory's faint plea pierced his ears, compressing into suffocating pressure. He gripped his phone, whispering details to the 911 operator, struggling to keep his voice steady. The operator assured him patrol cars were minutes away, urging him not to act rashly. But each second stretched like an eternal sentence. Footsteps behind him made Walter jump. 2 men in jogging gear appeared, sweat still on their brows. They peered through the window, then froze at the scene inside. Their eyes shifted from curiosity to rage. One whispered, voice tense, "We can't just stand here." Walter meant to stop them, recalling the wait for police warning, but Rory's eyes in the shed silenced him. The taller man strode to the door, pounding his fist on the metal. The thud, thud echoed through the night. "Open the door," he shouted, his voice ringing across the grass. The shed fell silent. Seconds felt endless to Walter. Then a cry broke out, weak, torn, "Help me." Just then, sirens wailed in the distance, slicing the night like a blade. Red and blue lights flashed from the park's entrance. 2 patrol cars screeched to a stop, tires kicking up mud. Doors flew open. 4 officers charged out, guns drawn. Their firm commands echoing. "Police, everyone inside, hands up now." No response. A heavy moment pressed the air. Then, with practiced precision, an officer used a heavy tool to break the lock. With splintered, hinges gave way. The door swung open, flashlight beams piercing the stifling space. Walter and the joggers caught only a glimpse of figures stumbling before commands roared. 3 men dropped to their knees, hands raised, eyes panicked. But Greg stood, his body shielding Rory. She curled on the floor, hands covering her face. "Step away from the girl," an officer's voice boomed. Greg spun, his face twisted under the flashlight's glare. "It's just a misunderstanding," he yelled, but didn't move. His hand reached for a bottle on a shelf, gripping its neck like a weapon. The air thickened. An officer's finger tightened on the trigger. A final warning rang out, cold as steel. "Put it down, now." Greg froze, his body trembling with rage. Then, like a snapped cord, he cursed, dropped the bottle, the glass shattering across the floor. Slowly, he knelt, hands raised. Handcuffs clicked shut on his wrists with a dry snap. Rory was pulled from the corner, wrapped in an emergency blanket. Her face was pale, eyes teary, but a fragile spark flickered as she saw Walter at the door. In that moment, he saw gratitude in her eyes, not hope, but a quiet relief, as if she no longer bore her pain alone. As the 3 other men were led to patrol cars, Greg suddenly thrashed. He broke free, lunging at Walter, his muscular frame shoved forward, eyes wild, roaring, "This is all your fault." Walter stumbled back, heart racing, nearly falling on the wet ground. But 2 officers grabbed Greg, pinning him down, his arms twisted behind. His curses echoed, gritted through clenched teeth, until the patrol car door slammed, trapping him in cold metal. Around them, lights flashed, radios crackled, officers' boots pounded. The once quiet park was now a chaotic scene. Rory was led to an ambulance, a medic checking her pulse, wrapping another blanket around her. A social worker sat beside her, whispering softly as a breeze. Walter stood a few steps away, his hands still trembling. The tension of days burst, leaving deep exhaustion. But he felt one thing clearly: choosing not to turn away had saved a girl's life. The joggers finished their statements, leaving with a nod and weary smiles. One gave Walter a thumbs up, a wordless look of respect. Walter nodded back, silently grateful for their timely intervention. As the dust settled, he looked toward the ambulance. Rory sat there, her face still tear-streaked, but her eyes no longer lost. She met Walter's gaze, giving a slight nod, That small gesture was enough to ease him. Tonight, darkness nearly swallowed a young life. But thanks to an old driver's persistence, light broke through, pushing back the night. Willow Glen Memorial Hospital's emergency room glowed with stark white light, the antiseptic smell a cold reminder that no secrets survived here. Walter sat on a plastic chair in the hallway, hands clasped, eyes fixed on the closed ER door. His body felt like stone, his mind a tangle of relentless images. Rory trembling in the ambulance, Greg cuffed and dragged away, his shout of "This is all your fault" still ringing in Walter's ears. Nurses' hurried steps flowed constantly. An officer took Walter's statement, then left, granting him a moment of quiet. Time stretched like a taut thread, ready to snap. Walter leaned his head against the wall, eyelids drooping. But just as sleep's edge neared, a loud sound jolted him. The ER door opened. A young doctor stepped out, stethoscope still around his neck. Walter sat up, his heart awaiting an answer. The doctor introduced himself briefly, Dr. Chin, handling Rory's case. His voice was steady, unhurried, but heavy, carrying news Walter knew he wasn't ready to hear. Initial exams confirmed. Rory was pregnant, in her early weeks. Each word struck like a hammer to Walter's chest. He closed his eyes briefly, his breath catching. The vague suspicions of days past now solidified into bitter reality. Before Walter could respond, another sound tore through the hallway. A woman's voice, urgent, heavy with panic. The hospital doors burst open, and a black woman in her late 30s rushed in, heavily pregnant, followed by an elderly woman with silver hair and a stern face. The younger woman called Rory's name, her voice breaking with tears. No explanation needed. Walter knew. Rory's mother and grandmother. They were led into the room. Walter stayed outside, hearing sobs, chairs scraping, Dr. Chin's calm voice. He stepped closer, the door ajar enough to glimpse inside. Rory, on the bed, in an oversized hospital gown, her hair disheveled. Her mother knelt beside her, holding her tightly, shoulders shaking. The grandmother stood nearby, her face taut with pain and rage, as if ready to hunt Greg down. Rory sobbed, apologizing repeatedly, her words lost in her mother's embrace. But her mother shook her head, choking out that nothing was her fault. Walter saw in the woman's eyes a profound pain, but also an unshakable love. He quietly turned away, giving the family space, but before he could step far, a sudden cry rang out behind him. The mother clutched her stomach, face contorted, breathing rapid. The grandmother, panicked, supported her, calling for nurses. In seconds, the hallway became a small storm. Medics appeared, wheeling a stretcher, lifting the woman onto it, rushing her to the maternity ward. Her water had broken, labor starting early. Rory barely let go of her mother's hand before she vanished behind another door, leaving an anxious void. Walter stepped into the room, hesitant. Rory looked up, her eyes brimming. "Will my mom be okay?" Her voice a faint whisper. Walter nodded, sitting by the bed, his hand resting lightly on the metal rail. He spoke in a low, firm tone, assuring her the doctors would take care of her mother, that she was strong and would pull through. Rory nodded, but worry clung to her young face, her thin hands gripping the blanket. For a moment, the room fell silent. The grandmother stood at the door, watching quietly, her face a mix of sorrow and resolve. Walter looked at Rory, seeing her tremble not just from her forced fate, but from fear of losing her mother's love. The worry that a new baby would push her aside, leave her forgotten. Walter took a deep breath and shared his own story. He had 5 children, each with different personalities, different needs. But a father's love never ran dry, never divided. It wasn't a pie sliced into portions, but a candle lighting others. The more it shared, the brighter it glowed. Rory sat silent, her eyes lifting, a flicker of surprise and hope in them. Footsteps echoed in the hallway, more urgent now. An officer appeared, tapping the doorframe, gesturing for Walter to step out. His face was grave, his voice low. "Greg, and the three men were being questioned. Surprisingly, the three cooperated, revealing part of Greg's truth, a history of targeting single mothers, seeking to control their lives by breaking their children's trust. Walter listened, his stomach chilling. The final piece clicked into place. Disgust rose in his throat. But relief came too, knowing justice wouldn't let Greg slip away. The officer assured him that with evidence and statements, Greg was unlikely to make bail. Walter returned to the hallway chair, his eyes heavy. Far off, Rory's room door stood ajar, letting out a sliver of warm light. In the hospital's darkness, he realized the brutal truth had been exposed, but it was the first step toward Rory reclaiming her light. A newborn's cry echoed from the maternity ward, sharp as a knife, slicing the hospital's tense air. In the brightly lit hallway, nurses rushed past, their gloves glinting under fluorescent lights. Walter sat still, the sound filling his ears, his heart both aching and relieved. A new life had arrived amid chaos, and somewhere, a young mother was fighting to bring it into the world. He glanced back at Rory's room. The door was slightly open, white light spilling onto the tiles. Walter stood, his hand on the doorframe, then gently stepped in. Rory sat on the bed, the oversized hospital gown making her seem even smaller. Her eyes were red, but seeing Walter, they sparked with faint hope. "My mom, will she be okay?" Her voice was barely a breath. Walter sat by the bed, his hand resting lightly on the cold metal rail. He nodded slowly, his words firm. The best doctors were there, and the baby's cry was proof her mother and sibling were still in this world. Rory nodded, her shoulders still trembling, her thin fingers clutching the blanket's edge. Outside the window, night had fully fallen, darkness cloaking the bare trees. In the small room, only the steady beep of a heart monitor sounded. Rory sat silent, then her hand drifted to her stomach, an unconscious gesture that broke Walter's heart. At 14, barely past childhood, she was forced to carry a burden even adults would struggle with. Walter looked at her for a long moment, then began to speak about his 5 children, each different, each with unique needs. He spoke of tough years, thinking his love couldn't stretch enough, only to learn it never fragmented. It was like a candle, lighting others without dimming the more it gave, the brighter it shone. Rory looked up, her eyes glistening. "Really?" Her voice trembled, as if one wrong nod could shatter her trust. Walter smiled, nodding slowly. Her mother would never love her less because of a new baby. Her love wasn't measured in numbers, but in Rory's very existence. Fresh tears rolled down her cheeks, but this time they weren't from despair. They were a release, a breaking open of her heart. Rory gave a faint, tired, but genuine smile. Walter sat quietly beside her, a steady presence, letting her know she wasn't alone. Her grandmother entered, her stern face softening as she saw Rory resting her head on the pillow, breathing more evenly. She placed a hand on Walter's shoulder, a light but firm touch, a wordless thank you. He nodded, no words needed. In that quiet moment, they understood each other through glances, through their presence. Time passed slowly, the clock's hands sweeping silently. Outside, doctors bustled. The wheels of medical carts rolled down the hallway, doors opened and closed. Walter stayed, keeping the promise he'd made to Rory's mother before she was taken away. He wouldn't leave Rory alone. He recalled his early days driving the bus, thinking the job was just about getting kids to school safely. But now, looking at Rory, he realized it was more. Sometimes, a single caring glance, a choice not to look away, could change a child's life. A soft creak of the door pulled him back. A nurse stepped in, announcing the birth was successful. The mother was stable, the baby healthy. Rory sat up, eyes wide, a spark returning to them. Walter smiled, gently squeezing her hand through the bedsheet. In that moment, he knew he'd kept his promise. And more, he'd witnessed the start of a new chapter not just for Rory, but for himself, a man who learned courage wasn't always about strength, but about staying when others turned away. "All right," My dear audience, if you're watching and finding this story compelling, comment 1 or I'm still here to keep listening. The hospital grew quieter as the night stretched on. The baby's cries now echoed faintly from afar, blending with the steady hum of machines. Walter leaned back in his chair, eyelids heavy, but he wouldn't let them close fully. He knew he had to stay, at least until Rory's family was settled. An officer appeared at the hallway's end, his step slow but firm. Sergeant Harris, tall, with a calm voice. He led Walter to a small room nearby for a detailed statement. On the table, a notebook lay open, a pen ready to capture each piece. Walter began, recounting Rory's tears on the bus, finding the birth control pills under her seat, the missing camera data from that crucial day. He described her fearful eyes, Greg's dismissive attitude, and the scene at the park. His voice was steady, but his hands clenched, each memory cutting like a knife. Harris listened without interrupting, nodding occasionally, his deep eyes piecing together a larger picture. When Walter paused, exhaling heavily, Harris set down his pen. He explained that the 3 men arrested with Greg had agreed to cooperate for lighter sentences. They revealed Greg wasn't just an abusive stepfather. He was part of a shadowy network. For months, Greg used the liquor store as a front to meet others. Some sold alcohol to minors, others organized illegal gatherings. Rory wasn't just a victim at home. She was nearly pulled into that dangerous web. Harris lowered his voice, stating Greg had bragged to friends about controlling Rory, treating it as proof of his power. Walter's spine chilled. His scattered suspicions now formed a horrific picture. A man abusing both his family and a network exploiting minors. He felt like he was staring into an abyss, with Rory just a thread away from being consumed. Harris jotted down Walter's account, then looked him in the eye. "We believe you'll be a key witness. What you did today, not turning away, not ignoring, saved that girl's life." His voice was calm, but its weight made Walter's throat tighten. He shook his head, saying softly that anyone would have done it. But deep down, he knew many had looked away, but he hadn't. The statement took nearly an hour. When Harris left, Walter lingered, rubbing his temples. Outside, the hospital lights glared, but within him was a heavy darkness. Not just from Greg's actions, but from the indifference of those meant to protect Rory, the school, neighbors, the community. Anger burned for her, but a spark of resolve rose. He'd no longer be just a driver. Returning to Rory's room, he saw her grandmother by the bed, Rory asleep from exhaustion. Tear stains marked her young face, but her steady breathing showed she was safe tonight. Walter stood at the door, not wanting to wake her, but her grandmother turned, nodding slightly. In her aged eyes was a silent thank you, a recognition deeper than words. He sat quietly in the hallway chair. His body ached, but his mind wouldn't rest. Images of Rory crying alone on the bus haunted him. How many other kids were silently weeping, unnoticed? How many secrets hid behind quiet houses? That night, Walter didn't sleep. He sat watch like a sentinel, ensuring Rory wasn't alone in the dark. Morning light seeped through the hospital's long windows, dappling the white tiles. Nurses' steps grew lively again, medical trays clinking faintly. Walter remained in the plastic chair, eyes heavy from a sleepless night. Each time his eyelids drooped, the image of Rory cowering in the shed snapped him awake, like a soldier on guard. Around 7, sharp dress shoes echoed down the hall. Walter looked up, seeing a man in a dark suit approach. His salt and pepper hair was neat, tie knotted tightly, his gait familiar from the bus's rearview mirror, Principal Daniels. His face showed fatigue, but his eyes held a cold busyness, not concern. Daniels paused at Rory's door, adjusting his tie, then entered. Walter hesitated, then followed, standing by the door. Rory slept, her grandmother at her side, her mother resting in maternity. Daniels cleared his throat, saying softly he was there to check the situation. But as those words sounded, the grandmother turned, her bloodshot eyes sharp as a blade. "Check the situation?" Her voice rasped, each word firm. "You were warned first." Walter sent photos. Rory's teacher reported too. And you ignored it all. Daniels faltered, clutching his folder. He stammered that he was in a critical board meeting, unable to distinguish rumors from facts and hours. The grandmother stood, the wooden chair creaking. Her voice erupted, full of suppressed rage. In those hours, my granddaughter nearly lost her life. Walter stood at the threshold, gripping the doorframe. He saw Daniels bow his head, not from shame, but as if calculating how to protect his reputation. That look choked Walter. How many kids had silently begged for help, only to be ignored because a leader prioritized prestige over safety? The room's air thickened. Rory stirred, the blanket shifting, her eyes half opening, still groggy. Seeing Daniels, she blinked, then shrank into the blanket, as if his presence offered no safety. That moment stole Walter's breath. A child finding no refuge in her school's leader was the greatest failure. Daniels stepped back, saying he'd cooperate with authorities and ensure Rory gets counseling when she returns. Hollow words, like pre-printed reports. The grandmother stared into his eyes, her voice low but piercing. If you'd listened from the start, Rory wouldn't be here. You chose silence, and silence is complicity. Walter saw Daniels pale slightly, but he quickly retreated, promising to follow up. The door closed, leaving a faint cologne scent. Rory turned away, silent, her small shoulders trembling. Her grandmother sat, holding her hand, eyes burning like embers. Walter stepped in, placing a hand on her shoulder. He said nothing, letting his presence be her anchor. In his heart, a thought rose. Daniels might dodge today, but not forever. The truth was out, and indifference would pay a price. Outside, sunlight poured in, revealing cracks in a system that seemed solid. Walter knew Rory's fight wasn't over with Greg's arrest. It was a battle against silence, against dismissive nods, against cold excuses. And this time, he wouldn't stand aside. That noon, the sky was ash gray, clouds heavy with unshed rain. Walter left the hospital, walking slowly to the lot. The old green Buick greeted him with its familiar rattling engine. He drove per a text directions, straight to Willow Glen's police station. Inside, the air smelled of stale coffee and paper. Sergeant Harris waited in a small interrogation room, a laptop open on the table. Its screen's glow reflected on his stern face. "Thanks for coming quickly," Harris said, voice low. "We checked the bus camera data you reported missing." Walter sat, his heart quickening. Harris turned the screen toward him. Videos flashed by students laughing, the usual clamor. But then, that day's file was gone. Just a black, silent gap in the sequence. "Not a technical glitch," Harris explained. "Someone logged in and deliberately deleted it." Walter frowned, tapping the table. "Who has access?" "We traced the IP address," Harris replied. "And here's the troubling part. It came from Willow Glen High's office." The room's air froze. Walter exhaled sharply, eyes widening. He recalled Daniel's cold demeanor, his irritation at the call during the meeting. Harris typed, the screen showing system logs, admin account, login time, digital traces. All pointed to a school tech worker directly under Daniel's supervision. "We can't yet confirm the principal ordered it," Harris continued. "But it's hard to believe a staffer would delete sensitive data without higher-up direction." Walter leaned back, breathing hard. He pictured Daniels in Rory's room, his evasive eyes, empty promises. Anger flared like fire. If this was hidden from the top, the indifference wasn't accidental, it was calculated. Harris leaned forward, voice low. "We need a witness to confirm you alerted the school when you found the issue. Your texts, photos, all evidence of their negligence. Maybe cover up. Are you ready to sign a statement?" Walter nodded without hesitation. "I did my part." "They didn't." Harris printed the form, handing him a pen. As Walter signed, his hand trembled with emotion, each stroke heavy. It wasn't just a statement. It was a vow not to let Rory fall into silence again. When the paperwork was done, Harris stood, shaking his hand. "Mr. Harmon, you're not a cop, not an investigator, but you You listened, you acted when it mattered. That's what counts most. We'll keep digging into who deleted the data. If there's evidence, no one's above the law. Walter left the station, the early afternoon wind cutting through his gray hair, cold but clarifying. He sat in the car, not starting it yet. In the rearview mirror, his tired but resolute face stared back. He'd gone deeper into this than planned. But if he had to go further, he was ready. When the Buick rolled out, Walter didn't head home. Instead, he turned toward the hospital. He knew Rory needed a familiar face to feel someone was still on her side. But deep down, he understood the fight wasn't over. Greg was caught, but the school's secrets, the child protection system's flaws, remained in the dark. He thought of Rory, her quiet sobs on the bus, her panicked eyes by the trash can, her fragile nod in the hospital. They reminded him this duty couldn't be dropped. Outside, rain began to fall, pattering on the windshield. Walter let the wipers sweep it away, each arc clearing his view. In the rain, he saw clearer than ever. He'd become a witness, a gatekeeper to a truth bigger than anyone dared admit. Rain poured over the hospital like a thick curtain. Walter parked the Buick under a bare tree, the wipers swiping at the rushing water on the windshield. He reread Harris's text, eyes fixed on the brief message. The data wasn't just deleted, it was transferred elsewhere. His heart raced, unease spreading. Someone had stolen it, kept it for their own use. Not erased to bury, but to control. It meant another hand was at work, still hidden, and Rory wasn't fully safe. Walter took a deep breath, pushed the car door open, and ran through the rain to the hospital lobby. Cold water splashed, clinging to his old coat, but he didn't wipe it off. In the bright hallway, everything seemed normal. Nurses pushed carts, patients waited, but inside him, a smoldering worry burned. He reached Rory's room. The door was ajar, soft light spilling out. Rory lay curled, eyes closed, breathing evenly, her grandmother fingering prayer beads. Walter stepped in, and she looked up, her eyes a mix of exhaustion and gratitude. Her mom's resting in maternity, she said softly. She slept a bit. Thank God, she's calm for now. Walter nodded, sitting in a nearby plastic chair. But his mind couldn't rest like Rory. That text clung to him, making each second heavy. He looked at her sleeping, recalling the bus, her faint sniffles, her hand wiping tears, her panicked eyes when anyone neared. If that data fell into another's hands, Rory's pain could become a bargaining chip, a weapon to hide bigger wrongs. A familiar figure appeared in the hallway. Walter sat up, Principal Daniels. He was with a young man in a gray coat, unfamiliar. They whispered quickly, then Daniels hurried off, leaving the man striding toward the elevator. Walter leaned out, heart pounding. The man carried a slim black bag, small enough for a laptop or drive. A thought flashed. The data was transferred. It could be in this building. Walter stood abruptly. The grandmother frowned. He placed a hand on her shoulder, reassuring, I'll be right back. Watch Rory for me. Before she could ask, he was in the hallway, chasing the man in gray. His shoes echoed on the tiles as he followed. The man pressed the elevator button, waiting, his posture furtive. Walter kept his distance, heart hammering. As the doors opened, the man stepped in, and Walter slipped inside just before they closed, panting like an old patient. In the cramped space, the air was thick. The man kept his face down, clutching the bag. Walter glanced at it, spotting a zipper slightly open, a glint of metal, a portable drive. The elevator stopped at the basement. The man exited, heading to the underground lot. Walter followed, steps light, fearing his own echo would betray him. At the hall's end, a steel door opened, the smell of gasoline hitting him. The man pulled out keys, approaching a black sedan. Walter paused a few steps away, torn between grabbing the bag or running for the police. Time didn't allow long deliberation. The man opened the trunk, about to toss the bag in. In a moment, Walter stepped forward, his voice louder than his will. Wait. The man spun, eyes darkening. Seeing Walter, he faltered, then regained his cold composure. "Who are you?" he growled. Walter didn't answer. His eyes locked on the bag. A tense silence passed. Then, from the ramp to the lot, police sirens blared. Red and blue lights flashed on the concrete ceiling. The man gripped the bag, poised to jump into the car, but officers blocked him. Sergeant Harris led, holding up a badge. "Drop the bag, now." The man hesitated, then tossed the bag into the car, raising his hands. Officers subdued him in seconds, cuffing him cleanly. Walter stood frozen, chest heaving, sweat cold on his neck. Harris picked up the bag, opening it, pulling out a silver drive. He turned to Walter, nodding. "You were right. This is the camera data." Relief mixed with a shiver in Walter's chest. He looked through the flashing lights, thinking, a few minutes late, and the data would have vanished, leaving Rory without proof to protect her. In the station's interrogation room, harsh fluorescent light glared on a metal table. On it, the silver drive sat, small but heavy as lead. Walter sat in a corner, hands clasped, eyes fixed on it, as if a blink could make it disappear. Harris opened a laptop, connecting the drive. The screen flickered, revealing a folder packed with files, named by date. Harris opened one at random. A video played, blurry footage of the bus, students laughing and chattering. But then the camera lingered on a corner. A thin boy, head down, hands trembling with his backpack. Whispers and mocking laughter came from behind. He curled in, trying to vanish. Walter winced, memories resurfacing. He'd seen that boy, sitting alone many trips, quietly getting off at the last stop. But he never suspected the scene was recorded, stored on a secret drive. Harris fast-forwarded, opening another file. This time, a girl with neat braids sat in the front row. The camera silently captured her hiding a food container under her jacket, sneaking it home. A small detail, but in the wrong hands, it became leverage. A weapon to shame or coerce. Walter's back grew clammy. This wasn't just about Rory. Countless kids were watched, turned into data held by a hidden hand. He recalled their averted eyes, forced smiles on the bus, things adults easily overlooked. Harris scrolled silently through folders. Each video was a chilling piece. A boy crying over dropped homework, a teen rolling up a sleeve, revealing a bruise, students passing a hidden beer can in a backpack. All meticulously recorded, clipped, and filed. No doubt, someone deliberately collected vulnerabilities, building profiles to control a generation. Walter gripped the table, his chest tight. Disgust rose, mixed with smoldering anger. Who would do this? A corrupt teacher? An official using kids as pawns? Or worse, a larger network, infiltrating a supposedly safe school? Harris paused, face grim. "We'll need a specialized team to process this drive. But it's clear, Rory isn't the only victim. If this data reached others, more kids could be hurt, manipulated." Walter nodded slowly, eyes on the screen. He saw Rory's face blend with the others. They seemed to look at him, demanding a promise no one else would be forgotten. Then, noise erupted outside. A young officer rushed in, handing Harris a paper. He scanned it, frowning. "The guy caught at the hospital, he's not talking, but we found he's directly linked to a school staffer. That person used an admin account to download the data, then passed it to him." Walter recalled Daniels walking with the stranger in the hospital. The scene clarified, not random, but a link in the chain. Harris scribbled, voice sharp. "If someone in the school aided this, it's deeper than we thought. We'll need a warrant for Willow Glen's office." Walter sat silent, a pulse throbbing at his temple. He realized, what he saw on the bus was just a door to a vast, dark room. Rory was one of many victims. This truth could shake the community to its roots. Under the pale fluorescent light, he wondered if he had the strength to keep going, or would be swept away in this filthy vortex. But Rory's pleading eyes gave him the answer. Having witnessed, he had no right to turn back. The next morning, the sky was clear but offered no peace. At Willow Glen High's front lawn, patrol cars lined up, lights flashing silently. Police set up yellow tape, Curious students held back. Whispers buzzed like a small wave. Walter stood behind Harris, heart pounding as they entered the administrative wing. The familiar school red brick, polished halls, neat motivational posters felt fake today. A place of learning now hid something sinister. Daniel's office was at the hall's end. As police pushed the door, the smell of polished wood and stale coffee spilled out. The desk was tidy, papers stacked, a family photo neatly placed, all exuding unnatural discipline. A tech officer moved in, connecting a laptop to the desktop. The screen lit up, files appearing. Harris stood, arms crossed, eyes tracking the scrolling text. Walter lingered behind, feeling like an intruder in a hidden world. Then evidence emerged. In Daniel's hard drive, beyond administrative documents, a hidden folder appeared, holding copies of the camera data. Lists of student names, dates, brief notes, a second archive, mirroring the stolen drive. Walter held his breath. No more guesses. Daniels didn't just know. He managed the data. He didn't delete from neglect, but to control what existed, what vanished. An officer opened a desk drawer. Beneath files, a burner phone. Harris powered it on, scrolling through messages. Cold words appeared, sharper than steel. Ensure no one sees the October 14 footage. The kid in the fourth seat. Below, a reply. Handled. I have the original. Walter's spine chilled. October 14, the day Rory cried hardest. The footage Daniels erased revealed a truth he refused to face. Harris gripped the phone, eyes darkening. That's enough, he said, signaling two officers. They stepped into the hall, calling for backup. Then the door swung open. Daniels appeared, tie perfect, face calm as always. But seeing the police search, his eyes froze. What's this about? He snapped, his voice trembling slightly, no longer fully confident. Harris held up the warrant. We have evidence you deleted and stored camera data illegally and contacted outsiders to conceal it. Mr. Daniels, you're detained for investigation. Daniels' face paled, then flared with anger. You don't understand. I did this to protect the school's reputation. A scandal would label every kid. You think you're saving them, but you're ruining the community. Walter stepped forward, voice low but clear. No, Mr. Daniels. Ignoring the truth is what ruins. Rory didn't need a pristine school. She needed a safe one. The words thickened the air. Daniels glared at Walter, eyes flashing resentment and helplessness. As officers approached, he resisted weakly, then was cuffed and let out. Students' whispers outside rose, laced with fear. Walter glanced at the neat desk, papers perfectly aligned. He understood that order was a mask. Beneath, a rotten network had thrived, silently consuming unprotected kids. Harris closed the laptop, signaling the tech to seize all devices. We've hit the first layer, he said, voice low. More questions. Who did he keep the data for? Why share it outside? Walter looked out the window, where the schoolyard buzzed with students. Innocent faces, unaware they'd been reduced to cold files. He saw clearly, his work wasn't done. Rory was saved, but other kids needed someone to speak for them. Rain pattered on the school's roof as Walter and Harris left Daniel's office. The hall glowed with fluorescent light. Students mostly cleared out, but chaos lingered in the air. Harris pressed a phone to his ear, brows tight. Who just accessed it? He asked sharply. The other end crackled with tech room noise. Harris listened, then hung up, face heavy. Not Daniels, he said. As he was cuffed, someone else logged into the server from a hidden connection. We're tracing it. Walter's spine chilled. Daniels was just a link in a larger machine. He pictured an unseen hand, manipulating from afar, still hidden. The police team moved to the basement, where the server room sat at the end of a narrow hall. A steel door was locked tight, a tech hunched over a screen. Someone copied nearly a gig of data before disconnecting, he reported. The IP traces to a commercial server in Chicago. No one spoke. The city was hours away, but the distance felt like an abyss. Walter took a long breath. So someone's still out there, maybe holding more data than Daniels. Harris nodded, signaling his team. We'll get the FBI involved. This is beyond town jurisdiction. He turned to Walter, voice slower. But to find who's behind it, we need a witness. You saw where this started. Are you ready to keep going? Walter looked at his calloused hands. For years, he wanted a quiet job. Drive, shuttle kids, go home at dusk. But that peace was shattered. Rory, the other kids they showed him, even ordinary people must face the dark sometimes. He nodded, no hesitation. Harris gripped his shoulder. Then brace yourself. This fight isn't over. That afternoon, Walter returned to the hospital. Rory sat in her room, hospital gown over her knees, eyes distant, gazing out the window. The storm outside mirrored her eyes. Seeing Walter, she gave a faint smile, fragile as if it might dissolve. I heard they arrested the principal, she said, voice weak. Walter sat, nodding. Yes, but there are others. We don't know who yet. Rory fell silent. Her small hand rested on her stomach, an instinctive gesture that pained Walter. He wanted to reassure her, to say all would be well. But he knew long days lay ahead, more investigations, more painful truths uncovered. All he could do was sit beside her, a small anchor in the storm. Outside, thunder roared. Walter thought of Daniel's resentful glare as he was cuffed, the stranger with the data bag, the unseen network watching. But the image he chose to hold was Rory exhausted, yet strong enough to smile. As he left the hospital, the rain eased. The air was damp but clear, as if the sky had fought its own battle. Walter stood by his car, looking at the lingering gray clouds. He knew this journey had no end yet. Hidden figures remained. Other kids needed protection. But today, he hadn't turned away. He opened the car door, settling into the driver's seat. On the dashboard, the key trembled lightly. He gripped it, feeling the cold metal in his palm. Then he started the engine, the old machine's hum blending into the vast space. Driving back, streetlights blurred into golden streaks through the windshield. Walter told himself, this fight wasn't his alone. But sometimes, one person stopping, listening, could change everything. And he'd keep listening no matter who hid in the shadows, no matter how long the road ahead. Night fell over Willow Glen, but within Walter, a fire smoldered. From a quiet cry on the bus, he'd followed a thread to a dark network, exposing a truth many wanted buried. Rory was saved, but that drive showed other kids carried unheard secrets. This story isn't just about a cruel stepfather or a corrupt principal. It's a reminder that silence can kill, but a caring glance can save a life. Walter, an ordinary driver, chose not to turn away. That choice changed everything, but the darkness hasn't vanished. Someone out there still watches, ready to twist the truth again. Can Walter keep going, facing a machine deeper than he imagined? How will Rory and other kids find justice and healing in this journey? This is just the beginning. If you believe this story deserves to continue, share your thoughts in the comments. What should Walter face next? Who do you think is behind this network? Share your feelings, because your empathy could light the way for the real-life Rorys out there.